Yeah, we are live. If anybody wants to do a test, that will be good. Otherwise, we are good to go. So, Om Ganana Am Twa Ganapatikam Havamahe Kavim Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jyeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspata Anashvannotivasi Dasadanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Bhirvajinivati Dhinam Avitrevato Mahasaraswati Namaha Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Guruve Sarvalokanam Vishajay Bhavaroginam यदि सर्वविद्यानां श्रीदक्षिणामूर्तये नमः अस्मिन् गुरुचरणारविन्दाभ्यां नमः देवीं वाचमजनयन्तदेवाः तां विश्वरूपा पशवो वदन्ति सा नो मन्दिरेषु मूर्जन्दुहाना धेनुर्वागस्मानुपतिष्ठितयितो व्यासं वसिष्ठरप्तारं शक्ते पौत्रपकल्मषं पराशरात्मजं वन्दे शुकतातं तपोनिधिं व्यासाय विष्णुरूपाय व्यासरूपाय विष्णवे नमो वै ब्रह्मनिधये वासिष्ठाय नमो नमः श्रीगुरुभ्यो नमः शिवशक्तिसमारम्भां भास्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मत्श्रीनाथपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम् श्रीललितामहात्रिपुरसुन्दरी समेत श्रीचन्द्रमौलीश्वराय नमः श्रीकाञ्चीकामकोटिपीठाधिपति जगद्गुरु श्रीशङ्कराचार्य श्रीचरणयोः प्रणामाः स्वस्ति श्रीमदखिलभूमण्डलालङ्कारत्रयत्रिंशत्कोटिदेवता सेवित श्रीकामाक्षी सनाथ श्रीमदेकाम्बरनाथ श्रीमहादेवी सनाथ श्रीहस्तिगिरिनाथ साक्षात्कार परमाधिष्ठान सत्यव्रतनामाङ्कित काञ्ची दिव्यक्षेत्रे शारदामठसुस्थितानाम् अतुलितसुधारसमाधुर्य कमलासनकामिनी धम्मिल्लसम्फुल्लमल्लिका मालिका निष्यन्द मकरन्दझरी सौवस्तिकवाङ्निगुम्ब विजृम्भणानन्द तुन्दुलितमनीषिमण्डलानाम् अनवृताद्वैतविद्याविनोदरसिकानां निरन्तरालङ्कृतीकृतशान्तिदान्तिभूम्नां सकलभुवनचक्रप्रतिष्ठापक श्रीचक्रप्रतिष्ठाविख्यात यशोऽलङ्कृतानां निखिलभाषण्डषण्डकण्टकोद्धाटनेन विशदीकृतवेदवेदान्तमार्गषण्मतप्रतिष्ठापकाचार्याणां श्रीमत्परमहंसपरिव्राजकाचार्यवर्य श्रीमज्जगद्गुरु श्रीमच्छङ्करभगवत्पादाचार्याणाम् अधिष्ठाने सिंहासनाभिषिक्त श्रीमच्चन्द्रशेखरेन्द्र सरस्वती संयमीन्द्राणाम् अधिष्ठाने सिंहासनाभिषिक्त श्रीमज्जयेन्द्र सरस्वती संयमीन्द्राणाम् अन्ते वासिवर्य श्रीमच्छङ्कर विजयेन्द्र सरस्वती श्रीपादानां च चरणनलिनयोः सप्रश्रियं साञ्जलिबन्धं च नमस्कुर्मः. How many of you have heard the term Shanmata Bhedam? Radha?
What are you saying? Shanmata, is it? Yeah, the 6 types of, goddess, Shiva, Vishnu, Kumara, 6 ways of reaching God. That's what I understand. That's all I understand.
Correct. I'll just give a very short introduction on that. When Adi Shankara came into prominence, it was a period where it was predicted that that will be the end of the Vedas. Right? Everybody were up against each other fighting. The Vaishnavites said Vishnu is supreme to Shiva. Shaivites said no, Shiva is supreme. Shakta followers of Shakti, said no, Devi is ultimate. Shiva, Vishnu are all inferior to Devi. And in the south, there were worshippers of Kartikeya, Subramanya, Kartikeya. They said no, what we understand is only Kartikeya, Subramanya. In the west, if you come, it'll all be Ganapatya, which is Lord Ganesha. They'll always say everything is Ganesha. So if you see Subramanya in the south, Ganesha in the west, Shakti in the east, Shiva in the north. The full family had taken over north, east, west, and south. And in the middle, there was Vishnu. And they were all fighting. So the best way that you could come up with a compromise solution was invented by Sri Adi Shankara. So that is where he came up with the concept of Shanmata Vedam, or he introduced the concept of Panchayatana Puja. Panchayatana Puja is an arrangement of idols in your home. where you have 4 idols in 4 corners, and there is one idol in the center. And Lord Subramanya is the Deva Senadipati. He is the commander in chief of the forces of all the Devas. So he's anyway got a commander in chief position. So if you believe Shiva is everything and everybody else is inferior, he said you place Shiva Linga in the center. In the other 4 corners, you'll have Ganapati, Shakti, Vishnu, and Surya. Those are the 4 corners. If you believe Vishnu is supreme, you put Vishnu in the center, put Shiva in one of the corners, Ganapati and Shakti and Surya. And if you believe Ganapati is the supreme, then you keep Ganapati in the center and all others in this thing. But you'll have to worship all 6 of them every day. So there ends the story, that you cannot say, I am a Vaishnavite, I don't believe in Shiva, so I will not do any Shiva Ucharanais, etc., etc. It's a very important thing. So that is where, if you see in the Swasti that I chant, you credit Adi Shankara as the person who installed Shanmata Bheda concept, philosophy. That is the meaning of it. Good. So we are now coming to, so just to give you a quick summary or wrap up or revision, we all are getting into the mantras of Mundaka Upanishad. And at the highest level, Mundaka Upanishad is a conversation between sage Angirasa and as he explains to Shaunaka, because Shaunaka asked him a question: what is that knowledge that I should have by which I will have a knowledge of everything? Very simple question, which resulted in this Upanishad. And we went into the details of Paravidya and Aparavidya. Right? So Para means the absolute, the ultimate truth. Everything that is called Para is the ultimate truth. There is nothing beyond that. It is permanent, infinite, eternal. All of us, when we are born, there is the expiry date associated with it. You have plants, it'll have a shelf life. If you have fruits, there is a shelf life. Correct? Anything that is created, that which we see, feel, perceive, smell, taste, everything, it has got a shelf life. So I have heard people to say that, I gave birth to this child, I created this baby. In this today's world, many people talk like that. Jokingly, my own daughter also said that. I said, no, don't have that even misconception. You are nothing but a FedEx agent. We are all delivery boys. And that is very important aspect for people to understand. So before I started getting into what is this para or purusha or absolute truth, it was important for you to understand how we function. What are the limitations with which we exist in today's world? Whether you have in-depth knowledge in spirituality or in Bhagavad Gita and Veda, Upanishad, etc., or you don't have anything at all, we all live with certain understanding, thinking that this is what is life. But we also keep hearing in the spiritual circles, hey, this is all Maya, suddenly it will disappear. And then you wonder, I'm able to touch and feel and see, and how do you call it as Maya? Crazy guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Correct? This is the battle that we all have, which we find it difficult to understand. What is this terminology of Purusha, eternal truth, so on and so forth. There is also an apparent, please mark the word in bold letters, apparent contradiction as explained when you go through the various texts, where the Brahman is being described as Saguna Brahman and Nirguna Brahman. Correct? So, what is Saguna Brahman? What is Nirguna Brahman? What is Prakriti? Correct? If you want to go a little bit more technical, there are terms that are used as Hiranyagarbha, Virat, and Ishvara. So it is a maze of terminologies that are being thrown at you, and where you can find it difficult to understand what is being talked about. So I read an article by a lady. I mean, I don't know whether she's a super duper lady or she's just another scientist that is writing some article about her field of botany or the way she sees. She's a botanist, so she has described something that she sees, and I felt it is a very good example for everybody to use to understand. I'll briefly talk about it, and then I'll go into the spiritual aspect. Does it make sense? So it'll be easy for you to comprehend what is being talked about. So in the class that we did, the class previous to the previous week, we started with the second Mundaka, first chapter, first mantra, which is Tadetat Satyam Yatha Sudiptat Pavakad Visfulingaha Sahasrashah Prabhavante Sarupaha. It is there in the screenshot that I've shared with you today. Tathaksharad Vividhyah Sobhya Bhavaha Prajayante Tatra Chaivapi Yanti. This is the truth that as from a blazing fire shoot out thousands of sparks of the same appearance, so do the various beings originate, my young friend, from that imperishable, and unto it verily they go back again. Correct? So there will be several examples that I will keep giving short examples. I hope any one of the examples stick to you in your mind to get an understanding of what we're talking about. So I told you the Diwali Fuljadi, right? So there is a source of fire. From the fire, you see sparks. The sparks are also seen as part of fire, right? But you will agree that that spark has got a distinctive, different identity from the source of the fire. You can't say they're the same. They've got distinctive identity. So in a similar way, if you take an example of Mother Earth, which we used in one of the mantra, from the source of Mother Earth, you see all those plants and trees that are growing. So the source is the same from where all of these things originate. However, as they grow, they have their own characteristics or distinctive identities. So if you go and pluck a leaf from an apple tree, it'll smell different, it'll look different. If you see a peepal tree, it'll look different, smell different. The extent to which these trees have roots, how far and deep they go, they differ. But they all take the source from the same Mother Earth. Make sense? So if you want to take it in a very simple way, the whole concept that we keep calling Paramatma, and you don't know where is that Paramatma. In the cosmos, is that two-hand, two-legged human being sitting there that is called Paramatma? If that is so, how do we travel without fuel, energy? And there are many questions in WhatsApp that people ask me. Oh, you say that everything is there in scriptures, Vimana. So ancient Indians knew about planes and etc. So what was the fuel being used at that time? Because your whole world of transportation or mobility is associated with the fuel, and the fuel is fossil fuel again until the advent of electricity, where they said burning the hydrocarbon releases that energy, which is what is giving you the power to move. And I made a reference to transcendental meditations as the capability where, by controlling your senses and your abilities and perceptions, you can levitate. Levitate means you go anti-gravity, correct? So that is also true. There is no fossil fuel involved there to lift you. There is no thrust or engines, jet engines, which is the topic of the day for the next 3 days, that exist for that levitation. So just like the sparks from the fire, all of us, where there is a Jivatma, is from the Paramatma, the absolute truth. So, we also talked about in mantras where Sage Angirasa is explaining that when you deal with the lower level knowledge is all about words, sounds, rituals, procedures, using which you start creating stuff and you believe that it is your creation and you believe that is the truth. You can't be farther away from the truth. It is absolutely not the truth, and if you stop there, then you are the loser. That is in essence the short form of all the explanations that were given in the previous mantra. So I want to introduce one aspect which should stick in your mind. Anything that you talk about this lower level knowledge, anything that you talk about the truth, that I said is this is a phone and this is apple, this is a cup, this is a bottle, this is a can. Tell me what is important for you to know the truth, that truth. That the thing that you call as the truth, this is a phone, is the truth, isn't it? Am I lying? No, it is the truth. So what is essential for you to know this truth? Do you remember?
Its existence.
Okay, if that phone is existing, or that plant or tree is existing, or that rabbit outside is existing, or the deer is existing,
and the knowledge about it and the awareness about it.
How do you know? How do you have the knowledge and awareness? What is required for you to have that knowledge and awareness? See how it is important to think about the details instead of assuming it.
You have to see
Go ahead.
through the Gyanendriyas, you perceive.
You're getting very close to. Very good. So for the Gyanendriyas to function, what is required?
Mind.
One element. What else is required?
Buddhi.
That is another element. Imagine karmendriyas, 5 sensory organs, through which the Jnanendriyas function. You remember the table? And then the processing element of buddhi, ahankara, and chitta.
Yes.
So now you can understand the reason why I went into the details of those first before getting into this mantra. So again, in a very simplistic language, most people say, I'm talking to you. So talking, yeah, you're talking, I'm listening. Great. I also know the detailed definition of sound, parapashyati, madhyama, vaikhari, etc., etc. I get all that stuff. What you're actually doing is, when you're listening to me, you're also sensing the temperature of the apartment or the house that you live in. You're also impacted by the light. There could be some background noise, somebody doing some cooking, running a mixer, or there's a pet that is making a noise, or there's a bird that is chirping outside. So while you are paying attention and listening to what I'm saying, that sound that is transmitted is again received by your ear, which is again a karmendriya, and you absorb that and store that as sound. You're also storing the light, you're also storing the heat that you sense through your skin. And by the time, if you put your video camera off mode and just take a bite of a biscuit or a coffee, then you're also tasting while listening. Is that true? So under normal circumstances, we fail to recognize those details. If somebody says, what are you doing now? I'm listening to you. No, technically, as long as you're in the awakened state, which is what the consciousness is, right? We talked about 4 states. And ordinary mortal people, like, we can only realize and recognize 3 states. You remember the 3 states?
Waking, dream, and deep sleep.
Correct. So with the karmendriyas and jnanendriyas, this is as far as you can go. And in simple engineering language, these are your sources or inputs of various things that are happening around you, and your body or system is constantly taking an impression of that and storing it in the memory bank. Memory bank is the chitta. So that process is continuous. You can't stop it unless you are in a high state, right? High state could be through various things: alcohol, drugs, or many other things, which I don't have to elaborate. So when the memories are impressions, you imagine that like films, negatives in good old days is there. If you know what is a movie film reel, it is nothing but a series of frames organized in a particular way, and you run it through, then it looks like a movie. Correct? So your intellect, the buddhi, is like that processor that processes this data, puts them in order, tries to connect the dots, and tries to give you an experience or a perception. So when Tim Cook or Steve Jobs introduced some object like this and gave a name iPhone, you all associate. If I show you an iPhone, if I show you an Android Pixel, you will know that this is the iPhone, this is the Android, correct? You don't get fooled just by the rectangular shape or anything. There are attributes that you look into to associate and say, what is it? Same thing, like if I show you an apple and orange, you know this is apple, this is orange. You will never get confused unless you lose your cognitive skills. Make sense? So far, so good. So all these perceptions that we talk about is based on some data that you have been programmed in your brain, and there is a processor that compares. Oh, Steve Jobs told me this is iPhone. What I'm seeing now looks very similar to that, so it is iPhone. This is how we function. Anything beyond this, we don't recognize with our normal human skills and competencies. Does it make sense? So this is up to the three states. You need karmendriyas, jnanendriyas, and the buddhi, intellect, etc. for you to understand this mechanism. So everything that you say is the truth. You need to see it, feel it, hear it, smell it, or taste it. Anything that doesn't come under the purview of this, you don't recognize it, that it is existing. Welcome to the club of saying, I will accept that there is something beyond all of these things, which is the ultimate truth. So therefore, anything that you say about all these aspects, they are Maya. They are an illusion, because you need all of these tools to be able to perceive or experience the truth. Clear? So the absolute truth is beyond all this. I don't need, and I don't have, and I don't have, and I cannot describe with it is a rectangular shape, black color, the glass in the front, etc., etc. That is that absolute truth, because it is formless, colorless, shapeless, limitless, not a size of a rectangle, and it is not present in one location. My iPhone cannot spread all over the cosmos. It has got a definitive size, right? So that nirguna Brahman is, nirguna means without attributes, etc., is the Brahman or the Purusha. That is the absolute truth. So if I put the reverse of this, I am bound by these karmendriyas, jnanendriyas, and this whole process of intellect and consciousness to understand what I see as Maya. In order for me to know what is beyond that, I need to break away from the shackles of these consciousness and the limitations of or dependency on these karmendriyas and jnanendriyas. Is that difficult to understand? Correct? So The whole effort of trying to go from the lower level knowledge to the higher level knowledge is to break open the shackles which is binding us with these Ashta Chakra, which we call this Ashta Chakra Navadwara, is what we talked about in the last class. If you go rewind and replay, you will know. I thought somebody will ask what are those Ashta Chakras. If you have not done that, you should do an homework. And if you don't find an answer,
No, I was just counting whether it's 8 Muladhara and all those things. Are they?
No.
So I was just counting.
Yeah. So figure out, you will understand those things. So you have to be unshackled from these limitations to recognize what is the absolute truth. So that Purusha is imperishable. Okay? That, to understand that Purusha is called the higher knowledge. So the jivas in our individual human beings has come out of that Paramatma. The Jivatma has come out just like the flame and the sparks. It has come out from that Paramatma. So now take the example of the trees to human beings. From that Paramatma is sprouting so many Jivatmas. So if you refer to the Jivatma in you and me and her and Radha, it is one and the same. There is no difference between the Jivatmas because it has come from the same Paramatma. But now when you put that wrapper of all these Karmendriyas, Jnanendriyas system on top of it, each one of us behave different. So the Nama and Rupa, or the name that you are called Sonalji, she is called Padmaja, me Kumar, and she is Radha, and the way our appearance, external appearance, etc., which brings in all those motor organs and the Jnanendriyas and the Chittas, etc. These things limit you to that particular definition by which you sound different, you look different, you talk different, and you behave different. So if I tell you today it's very hot, somebody will say, oh, no, it's very cold for me. So the experience and perception from an individual to individual in the same room. I mean, you don't have to be in different places. You can't say, oh, no, you live in US and I live in India, so it is different. In the same bedroom, in the same room, in the same house, you can see two people, man and woman, will experience it differently. If not, start paying attention, you'll see the beauty. So that should explain how the imperishable or the imperceivable with your lower level knowledge is getting transformed into something which is limited, formed, characteristic, experience, and perceived. So far, so good. Okay. So in this case, the Nirguna Brahman is that is absolute truth, that the Jiva. And the Saguna Brahman is the one that gets the attributes. Make sense? Good. So with this, now we will go to the second mantra. Divyo Hyamurtah Purushah Sabahya Bhyantaro Hyajah Aprano Hyamanaha Shubro Hyaksharat Paratah Parah Hyaksharat Paratah Parah. Now, I'm sure you would be familiar with the term Padmaja, Sabahya Bhyantaro. Where do you use it?
I'm not recollecting.
Sankalpam. Apavitra pavitro va sarvavastam gato viva yasmaret pundarikaksham sabahya Shuchihi Manasam Vachikam Papam Samuparjitam Sri Rama Smarane Neva Vipohatina Samsheha Sri Rama 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 Titir Vishnu. No?
No, actually, I have not done this thing.
Laksha Chandi Sankalpam is all about that. Every Sankalpam. See? Okay, so it is the same word. So Purusha means that being. He means verily. Verily means truly. Divyaha means effulgent. Amurtaha, which means formless. Sabahya Bhyantaraha means existing both within and without, inside and outside. Ajaha, which is uncreated or unmanifested. Apranaha, without prana. And here is where I said, pay attention to the explanation that I'm giving so that you don't get confused, right? Slowly getting into the real meaning of those, finer meanings of those terms and understand what it is. Apranaha means without prana. Amanaha means without mind. Manaha means mind. So amanaha is without mind. Shubhraha means pure. Parataha means supreme. Anything to do with para means supreme. Aksharat. And the term akshara is translated by Adi Shankara as reference to the imperishable. Paraha means beyond and higher. Anything to do with para means beyond and higher, imperishable. So, in summary, the meaning of this mantra is that effulgent being, that one which is glowing, effulgent, is verily formless, existing both within and without, uncreated. It is not created from a source. There is nothing preceding that. Right? If you look at the tree, it is coming from that seed that you sow. Us, we come from that embryo. So there is a seed from where we are coming. So there's something that is preceding us, which from where we have transformed, where we have originated from. So this imperishable or the supreme has got nothing to precede. There was nothing that created this supreme or imperishable. And is beyond even the supreme imperishable. So here the Shruti is speaking of Nirguna or the transcendental, absolute aspect of the Brahman. If you remember in one of the mantras, that supreme Brahman was possible to be described as what it is not, a negative way of defining it. Do you all remember that? In the same mantra, there were three similes also used to describe it, one of which was again the trees that is sprouting from the earth or the hair that is sprouting from the scalp. If you remember that mantra, right? Padmija is now saying, oh yeah, now I remember it. So, yeah, correct. So, the previous mantra, the definitive Saguna aspect was described as the common origin of all life and existence, the Saguna aspect. But what Sage Angiras is saying is, don't take that as the absolute truth, that everything is originating from that, so that is the absolute truth. That Brahman is not the absolute, that Saguna Brahman. That Saguna Brahman is also referred to as Ishvara. Okay? So, if you summarize this mantra focuses on the Nirguna aspect as compared to the Saguna aspect of the previous mantra. So, as I promised you, I'm going to slightly digress and take you through one of the fantastic article that I read. And this is written by a lady called Anjali Sarkar. She's a doctorate. where she has made an attempt to differentiate the two terminologies, what is Purusha and what is Prakriti. Okay. So she starts with a picture of a tree in her backyard, which is of lemon or orange or citrus, a citrus tree, right? How many of you have seen a citrus tree? Yeah. So you know the shape of the leaf. The shape doesn't have a broad base or three leaves or tongue. It is straight, simple, common shape that we are all familiar with. And the citrus fruit is yellow in color, golden yellow in color, correct? So she said she went out and plucked that leaf, and her knowledge of that leaf was limited to, when she put it close to her nose, she could see the sort of a citrus feeling, the pungent or the typical feeling what you see of a lemon, right? She could see that it was green in color. She could see the shape of the tree, the leaf, right? The broad aspect of the leaf. And she could feel or sense the coolness it radiates, that leaf radiated. And when she chewed it, she could taste it with that stringent taste, which is associated with citrus. Now, what you will say is that is the truth, which is again the example that I give of an iPhone or a cup. You need all those attributes to triangulate the data and say, oh, okay, that is citrus. If I give you a leaf which is of a different shape, the fruit is a different color, and with a different smell and taste, you'll say, oh, that is apple. This is peach. This is pomegranate, etc., etc. She goes to describe beyond that in saying, had I been a botanist, you will not see the leaf as a leaf, as a shade or as a sheet of green substance. A botanist would be able to see without a microscope those cells in those leaves, right? You don't need to be a botanist or a scientist to understand that. If I am a cardiologist, I will not see every human being as just the external appearance. For them, it is like a snapshot. Within that external appearance, they can see all the heart and all the various aorta, pulmonary artery, and capillaries, all the way going to the last bit of details in the human body. Their way of looking at the human body will be different because of the knowledge that they have. Correct? So just because the cardiologist can view it from that angle, from that perspective, that you and I cannot, unless we go through some reading material related to the cardiovascular system, still that person's knowledge and perception experience will be different than yours and mine. Correct? Now, cardio is more physical, so you can still attribute, oh, I can touch and feel this is the heart, this is the aorta, this is the pulmonary artery, etc. Think of a neurosurgeon. They'd study about neurons, dendrons, pathways. So, a neurosurgeon's perception of a human being, understanding of a human being, when they look at us, will be much different than a cardiosurgeon versus you and me. This is the point I'm trying to make. It is all the same thing. We are all seeing the same thing, but the way we intercept, perceive is different based on our karmendriyas and jnanendriyas and the extent of intellect. So, what differentiates there is the intellect, the knowledge. That is the differentiator. Correct? So she goes to say that, I did not appreciate the fine microscopic vessels that ran between its surface, or even more, the dance of light that seeped into its pigment to produce sugar. If you're all familiar with the photosynthesis process, if you now go back to your biology class in school, you'll see that complex diagram that we were all made to draw and study. Correct, Sonalji? I don't know about the schooling system in Kenya. It should be very similar, right? So now if you pay attention, your same understanding and appreciation of that leaf undergoes a transformation. If you apply some of that knowledge, you'll see the same thing in a much more detail, or you'll see things that others can't see. Now, if you talk about all these things to a villager that has never gone to school, do you think both of you are going to agree? The answer is no, right? So now, if she says, had I been a botanist, I would have focused on the unseen facets of the leaf in my mind's eye, more than its apparent brush with my senses. After all, doesn't an archaeologist see the ancient city with more vividly than the present ruins? So even if there are only ruins, the archaeologist can recreate and imagine the city as it used to, or the structure as it used to exist originally, which you and I may find it difficult, right? So now she's going one level higher. She says, even if I had been a botanist who knows more about the plant world than an ordinary person, I would still not appreciate the multitude of other aspects of the leaf. I would not, for example, consider its counterparts in parallel universe. Mark the words, as a quantum physicist might. So we saw the capability of a cardiologist or cardiosurgeon versus a neurosurgeon. Now you take the whole ability of a person who's a quantum physicist. So a quantum physicist can appreciate the existence of the universe in a different way than you and I, because it is beyond our sensory perceptions. Making sense? Padmaja is saying, okay, keep going. I'll tell you later. Yeah. So, by delving into the unknown and unknowable that I can only speculate about, I would not have considered the relationship of this particular leaf in my backyard to the myriad other ancestral and contemporary leaves it may be bound to by virtue of genetics or function. So now you're only looking at that one leaf. That leaf is part of a branch. That branch is part of a tree. That tree is part of a larger ecosystem on Earth. That Earth is part of a larger cosmos or universe. Have you ever had that appreciation by just looking at the leaf? Oh, this is how, it relates to part of the cosmos. You just limit yourself to say, I see the leaf, I appreciate it as a leaf, I eat the citrus, and I'm done. Tomorrow it's a new day. So you need to understand and appreciate this process and this existence to be able to even venture out in saying, how do I understand there is an absolute truth beyond what I know? So if you really quickly summarize, all what you're talking and looking, even with these five sensory organs, are taking you to a certain limit. But you need to accept the fact there is something beyond what you can see and perceive, hear and feel and taste, from where all of us have come to existence. You need to transcend from that lower level knowledge to the higher level knowledge to be able to understand and see that or experience that. So in short, you don't need a prana or any of the sensory organs or the consciousness, all those elements that result in your experience and perception. You don't need any of that to realize the supreme. Making sense so far? So when you are trying to learn the higher level knowledge, all your effort is to how to be able to get out of the dependency on consciousness, get out of the consciousness. And there I will introduce the term Satchidananda. Chit means consciousness, Ananda is bliss, and that is the Turiya state. So if you're able to take your system into that bliss state, only then you can recognize the Turiya state. And when you're ready to recognize the Turiya state, you will experience the absolute truth, the infinite truth, the imperishable truth, all pervasive, omnipresent. And I will give you one more hint there. And it is, and I love people when they give this kind of translation. There was a person, I don't want to name the person, was giving us a lecture in a law college. So there are young students sitting in the audience, and one student wanted to make fun because law means everything is defined as per the statute and the bill, and that's all that they can think and understand. So they said, in your scripture it says uh, Shiva is everything and um, Shiva is nothing. So everything is equal to nothing. How can it be? So tell me, what is Shiva? And I have talked about it in one of the classes also. So I'm just trying to remind you. When we talk of cosmos, and again, I'm sure if you're honest to yourself, your focus was on all the spherical objects that you have been told is rotating and revolving around in an organized, structured fashion. In our solar system, it is the moon around the earth around the sun has got all the other planets that is revolving around it, and we call that as a solar system. And we see there are multiple solar system in our galaxy, and in the galaxy there are multiple galaxies in the universe, and that is how we are taught to imagine and picturize. We never bother about that the darkness of that black dark stuff in which all of these things are happening. Correct? Whether it is this solar system or the adjacent one or the adjacent galaxy or universe, isn't the dark substance the same? So, if you don't even know how many galaxies are there in the cosmos, would you be able to think of how far and wide this dark stuff is? Make sense? So, start focusing on the dark substance. That substance is also within your body. That formless substance is also there in your body. So, that is what we talk about. Sabhabhya abhyantara means within and without, outside. It's the same. Got it? I'm just trying to introduce the topic in a very slow and systematic fashion rather than trying to put you through a whole bunch of words. But if you get this essential aspects right and understand that, yes, so far so good, I can perceive and listen, hear and understand, and then there is something beyond that is good enough. In the same context, as I said, if you see the spherical object that you can see, feel, etc., and it's all floating in something that you can't perceive, the same thing about our body. So prana is not everything. That absolute which is not manifested. Manifested means it has not come out in the form of a shape, size, or smell, or aroma, etc. Is what is unmanifested. That is also within your body. It's there in the cavities of your heart, lungs, nostrils, kidney, everywhere. So, what she says is, it is bound to the virtues or genetics or function, or consider that minuscule portion of the sun. So, the sun, which you can only see as a round object somewhere, but you can't see the light as such. You can only see the yellow color that is coming in. That sun is there in the leaf, but you can't visualize it when you just limit yourself to saying the leaf is of green color in this shape. Make sense? Okay. So there she says, so that means the leaf that I am used to knowing as a particular shape and color and size may not be the ultimate truth. And back again to the key concept that you need to come out of the shackles of all those five sensory organs to be able to see that truth or experience and visualize. So, in essence, you can only realize that truth. So, when you talk of unshackling yourself from the consciousness, from the limits of all the sensory organs, and the world of clinical evidence and proofs, you will realize it. And that is why it is called self realization. To realize something, you don't need these sensory organs and consciousness. Got it? Padmaja is saying, now my head is spinning. Padmaja is saying,
now. We require our mind to understand, no? The self-realization also we require something to
no, that is what I'm saying. You have to come out of all these limitations of sensory organs. Okay, I'll tell you one thing. I realized my mistake. Explain the process. What organ, what process was used to realize the mistake? That realization just happens.
Mind. No, again, it's a mind, no? Chitta and buddhi.
Realization doesn't need experience and perception needs mind and buddhi and everything. So soak over this particular topic or this point. I will stop here for today and play today's video. I've tried to keep it in a very simple language and giving a very simple example, and you need to just focus on the details first before you start analyzing and putting in various counter arguments and arguments, which we will do eventually as we proceed to the future mantras and other mantras in the Upanishad. We will do that. But take a pause, take a break, absorb these terminologies that you have been exposed to today in more detail, in a different perspective, and ensure that you understand what was said today. Because without that, you will not be able to appreciate anything beyond. And hopefully, in the next class, I will put the same thing in a different format. Because when we say again, the example of the trees having their own characteristics, or each one of us having our own characteristics, is also attributed to something like air or ether that is there in a pot, right? A pot, you can say, oh, this is a pungent odor. In another one, you can say, oh, it's a sweet aroma. It's the same ether. It is getting captured in different pots. Depending on what is there inside the pot, the resultant experience or perception will differ, right? If you have curd in something, if you have sambar in something, if you have sweet something else in something, or a burning smoking stuff in something, the same ether is perceived and experienced differently in different pots. Correct. So I'll talk about a little bit of more examples and explain the impossible or the imperishable in the subsequent mantras. All right. So we'll stop here officially. I'm stopping the recording. If there is any other question you have, you want me to answer now, I will. Hang on. And yeah, Padmaja, if you want to sign off, you can sign off.
No, just I want to ask, today you want us to reflect on the experience of